Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Cohen. I'm a managing director at Accenture, and I want to welcome you to one of our Women in Leaders series. And this one, I'm very excited. I am here with Holly Rockweiler, the CEO of Medora. And you all are going to be pretty inspired by the end of this, I'm sure. So Holly, thank you so much for virtually sitting down with me.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you. I thought it would be great just to start with, just an introduction and just introduce yourself to those who may not know you or your journey.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. So I'm Holly. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Medora, and we are a women's health company treating vaginal dryness and atrophy for postmenopausal women. And then personally, my journey starts as a biomedical engineer. I worked for several years after getting my master's at Boston Scientific as a research scientist. Learned a ton, realized I wanted to try something on a little bit smaller company size scale. So I went to Stanford to do their biodesign program. And after a year in the fellowship, that led us to spin out Medora.
Fantastic. And I hope that many of those reading or listening will look at your LinkedIn profile and be pretty inspired by what's written there, which is whereas most people would put, a job description or a role nomenclature, you say you are on a mission to improve women's health. And wanted you to share what the driver behind that mission is for you.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. So starting the company, again, was a spin out of this work we did at Stanford, and never in my, wildest dreams did I imagine that I wanted to work into women's health, but I feel so fortunate to have landed there. And why I feel that way is that the amount of unmet needs is so immense, and like, this, I don't mean this to sound silly, but like the smallest thing can really help and make a huge impact because we have so far to go. And so it seems like a lot. When I worked at Boston Scientific, it was in the cardiac space, and that was really important and very impactful as well. But it didn't require the same amount of boldness and I don't want to say defensiveness. I mean, just strongly stating what you're doing. I work on vagina science, and that's still makes people blush. And it's kind of amazing because that's just a part of the body. So part of me writing that on maybe I should put vagina straight up on my LinkedIn profile is just to recognize that, hey, by the way, more than 50% of the population has these parts, and, we need to take care of them too. So I don't know. I just, after working in the space, started recognizing that, you can't work in women's health without feeling the need to support one another who are also working in the space, but also just be loud and tell women that it's okay to talk about these issues, and frankly, you deserve much better. And so that's probably why I wrote it. I don't think I even thought that hard about it.
Well, now you did. No.
Yeah.
And what do you it's interesting because you do work in a space that would make potentially 50%, maybe not all the whole 50% of the male population blush, and maybe some women too. But what do you say when you're in those conversations? How do you make people feel more comfortable and kind of get their head around this is health, and these are serious issues and topics that need to be addressed?
Well, I appreciate the question because I personally have come on a journey with it as well. When we first started the company, when I would talk about it, I would say, oh, we're improving quality of life. And I'd be pretty vague about what we're doing, just in it's like, oh, I don't want to shock anybody. I was preparing for a pitch competition with a group of other entrepreneurs who all happened to be men. And they were like, just say it. If you're not going to say it, who is? And it was kind of a watershed moment for me. I was like, well, yeah, if I'm someone working on it, I'm not ashamed of it. So I shouldn't act like other people should be ashamed of this, and just be open. And so I always try to talk about it just like diabetes, just like asthma. It's just a health condition, and we don't have to just suffer with it. We can do things to improve it for, ourselves if we have it, or raise awareness so women know that there's options out there today, and there's better options coming. We're not on the market yet, but this is not something you just have to suffer with.
And where do you see the focus for women's health over the next 5 years as you think about what great could look like for this this therapeutic area, right? This area of certainly focus for your company, but others too.
Yeah, I think it's exciting to see how women's health has broadened in the conversation. So, obviously femtech is a term now. I joke about that. Like, we started the company 6 years ago. We didn't have a hashtag. Like, now we do. It's great. There's a conversation and people recognize the term. I also feel like the term femtech is somewhat limiting in terms of it. I'm glad it exists, and I think it is all trying to be as encompassing as possible. But, in the past, I think women's health focused on surgeries for women. And then, much more recently, now we're talking about apps and fertility tracking and things like that, which are all really important. But there's a lot of things that still aren't talked about. And obviously menopause is one of them. And that's changing. And I'm so excited. And we have a lot of other great companies in the menopause space. But in the next 5 years, I hope that becomes equally important. It's not just about a woman's reproductive years, it's about her whole life. And I think that conversation is finally changing, and we can talk about, periods, and we can talk about infertility, because that's a big part of what a lot of women deal with. But also we can talk about, after all that's over, there's still, 40 plus years of a woman's life after that she deserves to live well in. And so I think focusing on the needs for women in that space. And I also think too, an area to focus on is conditions that disproportionately affect women or disproportionately affect different ethnicities of women. I think that's something that's easy to overlook as well, but that's a big part of what it means when I say women's health. It's about improving the health of women, period.
Yeah. And in a given week, Holly, how do you advocate for these issues? What groups maybe do you speak to, or I don't know, government or the private or sector, or how do you? Because it does seem like there's unlike some other disease areas which are just have been traditionally in the spotlight, and most people don't blush when you talk.
Yeah.
Others, like how are you inserting or creating that conversation?
That's a great question, because I feel like as you're talking, I'm like, oh, I should probably be doing more. I should be doing a lot more. I'm a scientist by training and engineer, so I'm like we're pretty laser focused on developing our technology. That said, I do see, being a part of the community, see a lot of people doing good work. And so, for instance, just before this interview, I was reading the Femtech Insider newsletter, which I think is fantastic. There's Femtech Focus. Springboard launched a women's health coalition that I think is really exciting. So my excitement is to partner with people who know how to do that stuff well, who get PR, who get those types of conversations, and just be out there and be ready to join them, but also be out there to show people that you can talk about whatever issue you want to talk about too. We are part of elevating a dialogue around vaginal atrophy and dryness. And if you want to raise a dialogue around endometriosis, like, hell yeah, let's do it. I want to do more. I don't know. I don't have a good
All right.
answer.
Well, this is gonna watch out, world. Holly is hitting the circuit. So this is great. I want to sort of explore your leadership style too. I think the topic of Medora and the women's health issues that you focus on are critical to the world. I think you as a co-founder, as a CEO, leading the charge is also an important topic for people to hear about and to hear more about, your style. And so let me start with this. How do you describe, as a CEO, how do you describe the culture that you've cultivated at Medora?
Great question. So we're a pretty small team, but we've said, one of my team members came up with this and I love it. We want to be intentional about our culture and create it so it doesn't create itself, because culture is inherent. And if you don't pay attention to it and nurture it, you could wind up with something you're really not happy with.
Yeah.
So that's one piece. I think when I think of how to describe our culture, I think collaborative, supportive, respectful. I think, that's probably also inherent in being in the space we're in. That's how we want to treat all of our patients, or, people who would use our technology. I think the most important thing is also just, a results orientation, which sounds really, I don't know, like straight out of a career center, webinar about what you should say. But what I mean by that is not focused on a blame game, not focused on an internal or a personal agenda. It's focused on, okay, what is the right thing for our patients? And that drives what's the right thing for our company. And so we're trying to constantly keep the patient in mind and have all our decisions going towards what's best for her.
As you were kind of describing a culture that really celebrates collaboration, and that ideas can come from anywhere. When you might see something that is not aligned to that, or a behavior that isn't in that spirit, as the CEO, what do you do to try to, because a culture, it's funny, culture is one word, but it is actually coming from so many people, perspectives, personalities. You might have somebody who acts a certain way 90% of the time, but one trip up and it sort of throws people. Like how do you keep driving right towards towards your ideals, even when you might see something you're not sort of behind?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So it makes me think of a book I'm reading right now that's, I guess, a probably pretty famous leadership book. It was recommended to me by a mentor, and it's been really life-changing. It's called Leadership and Self-Deception, and it talks about how it's really valuable to see another human as another human. And if you care about them as a human, then anything you're doing is in service of their humanity, basically. I don't think I'm paraphrasing great, but yeah. So to your question, I think, if someone has a slip up, first of all, we all make mistakes. And so it's just a matter of talking to them about it. And, hey, Nicole, I observed this behavior. That's not like you. Can we talk about, what's going on? Is there too much on your plate right now? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Where you're feeling micromanaged? Here's what I'm concerned about. And I know you care about X. Like, let's figure out how to attack this together. I don't know. So I guess it comes back to the collaboration too, is like, no one's an island. We want to work together. And I know you're here because you care about the same things I do. So let's uncover what might be in the way of that for you.
Well, I love that you turn it into questions, right? I think that, leaders don't necessarily strong, powerful leaders don't necessarily observe a behavior and then tell you things you might already know. Like, that wasn't good. That was bad. You didn't get a good response out of people because you said something bad. Instead, like, realizing people people share thoughts, talk, but there's so much going on back here. They could actually be afraid of something or not feeling confident in a moment, or so to ask questions to really understand. I think that's exactly what leaders do. I also wanted to hook in another point that you made, which is that your focus on the patient, and how that patient centricity brings you all together. It's definitely something that's strong. It's an undercurrent of what motivates you as an organization, and what ideas or innovations you're coming up with. How do you do that? How do you bring in the voice of the patient? What's some of your some magical moments that have really allowed you to open the gates and bring that in?
Yeah, so I appreciate the question too, because it's, we're all in healthcare. We all think about patients, but it's you're right. It's a practice to make sure that it's a part of your, constant focus. And so foundationally, the biodesign program taught us how to use design thinking methods to really understand what an unmet need is and understand what other pieces of the solution your customer, in this case the patient, is looking for. And so that was really critical. So, you know, it's interesting. We started this company 6 years ago. We just engaged in a really large survey to test out kind of different price points and a couple different things about the device. And all the data came back super positive. And you know, we hoped it would, we thought it would, but you never know when you put this survey out into the world. And it was amazing because it really validated the primary research we did 6 years prior. And so you can't just rest on that, right? You have to stay fresh. So, but that was really a cool moment. But then secondly, I think another thing that's really important, that's hard to do, but is to get as many people in the organization to have direct conversations with people in your demographic, in your, you know, that you're hoping to serve. And so I can't tell you, like, you'll be in a meeting and someone say, oh, well, when I was at the clinical site and I saw this, da, 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 da. And it's like, you know, wow, like here's someone who's a mechanical engineer who maybe wouldn't normally be interfacing with the patient, but that really made an impression on her. So that's, you know, coming up in this conversation. So I think the more members of your team who have that opportunity, and it doesn't have to be a direct clinical observation. It can be a conversation. It can be reading some of the survey results. I think just having that in the kind of mind's eye of all your employees, the more the better.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. And based on people's backgrounds, they're going to you know, seek information, different types of information. You might have one person who's just seeking feelings and how did it feel, and another person is going to really focus on the patient perspective around the process and logistics. And the more people out there gathering, asking, yeah, I see that too. I think that's phenomenal that you all do that as well. And I guess to close, I wanted to ask you a bit of a quirky question. Quirky, I'm going to own that word, which is this. You know, I like to find out from leaders like yourself, you know, what have you learned or applied from other parts of your life, your like personal life, your extracurricular life, your activity, your hobby life, that have, you know, been applied to in a meaningful way your leadership style? And I always ask that. So just to overshare, because that's what I do, is that, you know, I bring a bit of a theater background. I was, you know, did improv comedy and I did theater, but improv comedy in particular taught me a lot that I have absolutely applied to the way I work. And so when I think about that, I think, well, I'm not, as much as I think I'm very unique, I'm not unique in that, you know, we have these very three-dimensional lives, and that what we do outside of work finds a home, or there's some applicability or lessons or something that you can take away. And so really, this is me asking as long a question as possible to give you time to think of what you're going to say.
Appreciate that.
Right. It's what I do. I have this going in my head sometimes, just to no, but I think that's always interesting for people to hear, because then they also think about themselves and what they do and what they can take out of their other experiences to help them be stronger people in the workforce. So what might that activity be, or interest or hobby, or something that you've done in your past outside of the workplace? How might you have pulled something out of there and it been helpful to you today?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the question because it also reminded me an answer to a prior question that you asked about culture. And I think that one thing I want to amend to my answer was that we also have a culture of bringing your whole self to work. Like we recognize that you're not just working Holly and then the rest of your life goes on. We think it's important to, you know, share as much as you're comfortable with about your personal life with your teammates so that everyone understands where you're coming from. So in that light, I became a mom about 1.5 years ago, and that's the first thing that popped into my head of what that has meant. Obviously, that's a transition that a lot of people go through, becoming a parent while also an employee, and it really changed a lot of how I think about work, and also it's given me surprisingly a lot of confidence.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, congratulations on your new addition, for sure.
Thank you.
Those are always great years. And thank you for sitting down with me virtually. Hopefully we can grab a cup of coffee in person at some point.
That'd be great.
But I'm so grateful that you sat down with us and shared your thoughts and your culture stories and what's important to you. This has been great. Thank you so much, Holly.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.